DBMS. Another integrity check that should be incorporated in the database is to ensure that there is a reference to certain object. That object must exist. Before inserting the value of 1100 into the account section, this value should be inserted into this. Got it clear? This is about integrity part. Next one is security. Again, data should be secure. That means no single user who is not having any access to the database will be able to access the record. That means only those users should access the database who are having the permission to access the records available in the database. See, data is of vital importance to an organization and may be confidential. Such confidential data must not be accessed by unauthorized persons. To avoid access of data by unauthorized persons, we need to enforce security checks. The DBA, who has the ultimate responsibility for the data in the DBMS, can ensure that proper access procedures are followed, including proper authentication schemes for access to the DBMS and additional checks before permitting access to the sensitive data. That means whenever a user is trying to access the database, the user should first log in. That means the user should have a valid username and a valid password. Without a valid username and password, no single user will be allowed to access data in the database. And this kind of security can be applied if we create the database using database management system softwares. Without any username and password, no single user will be accessing the database. Next advantage is conflict resolution. See, we have been discussing this point in the last two advantages, that data is kept in a centralized manner. That means DBA will keep the data in a centralized system. Accepted. Now there could be a chance that multiple users will try to access the data. Before that, one more thing we have seen, the data that we have kept on a centralized manner, that we have shared among all the users. We have seen two advantages. Data is kept in a centralized manner and data is shared among all the users. Now there could be a chance that two users simultaneously tried to access same data at the same time but in a different manner. Means, let's explain this part here. Suppose this is a table. In this table, the name of employee is, suppose, Atul. And there are two users. Suppose one of the name of user is X and second one is Y. X tries to access this table. Will he get access? Sure, he will get access because this table is kept in a centralized manner and user X is an authenticated user. He is able to access this table. Second, user Y, again the same, is an authenticated user. He is again eligible to access this table. Now suppose this user X and Y, they are trying to access the same table at the same time but in a different manner. That means this X is sitting in Latur and suppose this Y is sitting in Pune. And these two users are trying to access at the same time. User X tried to access this table and wanted to change the name Atul to Abhay. And user Y, who is sitting in Pune, want to access this table and want to change this name Atul to Arun. Just for example. Now the access requests executed by these users are correct because the data is shared. X is an authenticated user, Y is also an authenticated user. Both of the users are able to access this database. But if they are trying to access the database at the same time but in a different manner, that means they want to update this table whose employee ID is 100 and name is Atul. One user wanted to set this name, instead of Atul he wanted to set Abhay, and second user wanted to execute, instead of Atul he wanted to say Arun. This is called conflict. This is called conflict, or it can also be called as concurrent execution. So these kinds of conflicts are easily resolved by using database management system software. Since database is under control of DBA, he or she should resolve conflicting requirements of various users and applications. In essence, DBA choose the best file structure and access method to get optimal performance for the response critical applications, while permitting less critical applications to continue to use database, although with a relatively slower response. How this can be executed? See here. User X will try to access the database, user Y will try to access the database. To avoid this conflict, we can apply some protocols. Those protocols are called as concurrency control protocols. There are not many protocols. One simple protocol is locking protocol. What is that locking protocol? Whenever a user wanted to execute the table, before accessing the table, the user should acquire a lock onto this table, and after acquiring the lock only, the user is able to make the changes into the table. Just suppose user X try to execute the table employee, and here he is executing the command at 10 o'clock in the morning, and user Y, who is again trying to execute the same table, but he is late by 1 second. Firstly, the request was initiated at employee table from the user X. That means this user X can acquire the lock on this employee table, and user Y, who is late by 1 second, has to wait until user X finish. So this is a simple example of locking protocol. Such kind of locking protocols are applied, or such kind of concurrency control mechanisms are applied on the database with the help of database management system. And this is the advantage called conflict resolution. And this is what access method. Next is data independence. Data should be independent. So data independence can be executed in two ways. It has 2 points of view. First one, physical data independence, and the next one is logical data independence. Let us see what is physical data independence and what is logical data independence. If these two independence are obtained, then data should be independent. Physical data independence allows changes in the physical storage devices or organization of files to be made without requiring changes in conceptual views or any of the external views, and hence application programs using the database. Means what? Suppose we will consider the same example in a different manner. Suppose this employee table is stored on PC1, which is available in lab 1. So I would write lab1.pc1. Suppose this table is saved in lab1 PC1 in Cocksit. I'll skip this table for now. And suppose user X is trying to access the table. Now he accesses the table from Cocksit, lab1, PC1. Today's date, for example, 8 September. On 8 September, user X accessed the table which is available physically in Cocksit Lab 1 PC1. After some days, this table is shifted to Lab 5 PC1. At that day, again user X comes in and wanted to access the table. Suppose after one day, that means tomorrow only. If suppose this user try to access the table tomorrow, he will get access to this table. That means users are not required to know physical location of database. That means if the location of the data got changed, the user will still be able to access the data as it is when it was accessed earlier. That means user X will access the data the same way as if it was accessed on 8 September. Because data can change the location. Due to any reason, the locations could be changed. The changing location, the physical location which is changed due to some reason, should not affect the use of the data by the user. This is called data independence in terms of physical data independence. Have a look. Files may migrate from one type of physical media to another, or the file structure may change without any need for changes in application programs. Second example. Earlier, user X tried to use the data with these three columns. Okay, and on 9 September, suppose we added one more column, date of birth, in the same table. So we have changed the physical structure of database. We have changed the physical structure of this table. User X was able to access this much column on 8 September, and on 9 September, we shifted the table from Lab 1 PC1 to Lab 5 PC1, and 9 September we just added one more additional column. So these physical changes would not affect the user access to the data. That is called physical independence. One more time, I'll read the sentence for you. Physical data independence allows changes in physical storage devices or organization of the files to be made without requiring changes in conceptual views or any of the external views, and hence in the application program using the database. That means if the physical location of the table got changed, it will not affect the usage of data with the user point of view. User will still be able to access the data in a normal way. As it was executed earlier, user will be able to access it in the latter scenarios. Second, logical data independence. Logical data independence implies that application programs need not be changed if fields are added in an existing records, nor do they have to be changed if fields not used by application programs are deleted. See, we already have said this part. Suppose this is the column. This date of birth column is newly added. User X is trying to access the table. The application used by user X can display only 3 columns. The application program which is executed by user X can access only 3 columns. After some days, if the DBA added one more column into the table, that means the logical definition of the table has changed. Earlier it was having only 3 columns, now it is having 4 columns. This conceptual change in the database won't be affected by the user. If we add a new column, or suppose there is another column which was available in the table, suppose age. Suppose the table is having 5 columns. From the 5 columns, only 3 columns are accessible to the user. That means the DBA has made available only 3 columns to all the users. And after some days, DBA find out that these two columns are of no importance, we should delete these two columns. So user DBA deleted the column. So just because the table was having 5 columns earlier, from the 5 columns, 2 columns got deleted, it should not affect the use of the table to the user who was already accessing the 3 columns. Because the columns which were not in use were not already available to the user. So either they remain there or they got deleted, it should not affect the user at all. This is logical independence. So here implies that application programs need not be changed if fields are added in an existing records, nor do they have to be changed if fields not used by application programs are deleted. If we add new columns into this table, and if we delete some of the columns which are not in use from the user point of view, this kind of logical change should not affect the use of table for the user. That is called logical independence. Logical data independence indicates that conceptual schema can be changed without affecting the existing external schema. Now, as you have not seen the keywords conceptual schema and external schema, I won't go into details of this line. Simply you remember the point. If there is a table, if suppose there is a software defined using some language, and in the back end we are having a database. From the database, user is eligible to see only 3 columns. That means whenever the user tries to access the table, whenever the user tries to access the software, he will access only 3 columns. And suppose the table contains actual 6 columns. But how much are available to users? Only 3. So rest 3 columns, if they got deleted or a new column got inserted into the table, it won't affect the user, because anyhow user is available with 3 columns only. It won't affect the user because the logical schema has changed. It won't affect the user, and that is what logical independence. Data independence is the advantage in the database environment, since it allows for changes at one level of database without affecting other levels. That means either we change the data in physical manner, it won't affect in logical manner. And if we change the database in logical manner, it won't affect in physical manner. And this is nothing but independence of data in logical as well as physical manner. That is called data independence. These changes are absorbed by mapping between the levels. So again, the levels part was not discussed earlier, so I will skip that part here. So here are some of the advantages and disadvantages that we already have seen. So first advantage that we have seen was reduction of data redundancy, sharing of data, integrity of data, security of data, conflict resolution, and data independence. Hope you understood these advantages. Now let's start disadvantages. Significant disadvantage of DBMS system is cost. Now again, I would try to focus a little bit in the earlier days when DBMS came into picture. Actually, PCs came into picture in the 80s. PCs came into existence in 80s. At that time, if someone wanted to maintain a database, at that time, that means in 80s, okay, 1980s, if someone wanted to maintain a database, the cost of database management system was very high. And that is the single most disadvantage of database management system. That means purchasing the software to maintain the database was very costly. Okay, that is the one part of cost. In addition to the cost of purchasing or developing the software, the hardware has to be upgraded to allow for extensive programs and the workspaces required for their execution and storage. That means in earlier systems, if someone wanted to use database management system, we need to purchase that DBMS software. In order to execute the DBMS software, we need to make some changes in our existing hardware system. That means we need to purchase some additional storage devices. Again, we need to apply some cost over there. That means first purchase the DBMS, which is quite expensive. Then purchase a hardware device for storage components. That means storage devices. And to use the software, we need to get the training first. So the trainer again has to be paid fees for getting trained. So all these kinds of extra costs were the disadvantages of database management system. An additional cost is that of migration from traditionally separate application environment to an integrated one. I will skip this point for now. While centralization reduces the duplication, the lack of duplication requires that database be adequately backed up so that in case of failure, the data can be recovered. First disadvantage of database management system is cost. The cost of software was very huge. At the same time, we need to purchase some additional hardwares. Again, that need to be paid some additional cost. And to get training to use the DBMS software, we need to appoint some trainer. So again, the organization has to pay the fees for that trainer. So using a database system was quite costly. That is the first advantage. Sorry, first disadvantage. Second disadvantage was, as we studied in the advantages part, data is kept in a centralized manner. That means data was kept as a single copy. So if we maintain the data in a single copy, and that copy only get lost or get corrupted, that means complete data will get corrupted, isn't it? If we are maintaining the database on a single location, and if suppose that system got crashed or that system got hacked or some damage has occurred to that system, at that time the complete system will be damaged. So to avoid this, we need to maintain backup and recovery procedures for the database. So making backup and recovery procedures was quite tough task in the early days of computer system. And this is the second disadvantage of database management system. Backup and recovery operations are fairly complex in DBMS environment, and this is impaired in a concurrent multi-user database system. That means that will damage the system, because data is kept on a centralized system. To back up the data, when we are taking backup, backing up means making duplicate copy of the data. Suppose user are accessing the database, at the same time DBA came in and he is going to get the backup of data. Now people are using the database in terms of updation, deletion, insertion. They are executing all the operations. At that time DBA is running the backup procedure. At that time maintaining the backup was quite tough task, because it was very complex to maintain consistent database backup. So these are the advantages and disadvantages of database management system.